Hello, hope everyone had a nice Pesach. We're continuing with Pirkei Avos. And we're still on the first Mishnah. We're going very slow because we are using the commentary of Rabeinu Yonah. A very, I don't need to say it, but a very insightful commentary. He's a Rishon, one of the early commentaries, who will give us a lot of basics about Judaism and a lot of insight to Pirkei Avos. So we're in the middle of the first Mishnah, and we're up to the next line of the first Mishnah. Again, this is ethical advice of how to live our lives. So this is from the Men of the Great Assembly. So what was the next thing? They said, "V'hamidu talmidim harbe." You should have a lot of students. Now, Rabeinu Yonah is going to explain what this means. "V'hamidu talmidim harbe." You should have a lot of students. Kedas Beis Hillel. This is of the opinion of Beis Hillel. So apparently, there's a debate if one should have a lot of students. So let's see, what's the debate about? Ke'inyan sheshaninu, like we learned in Avos to Rabbi Nassan. Beis Shammai Aimer. So we know that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai had a lot of debates recorded in the Talmud. So this is one of them. Beis Shammai held, Ein melamden ela l'talmid hagon. Beis Shammai said you should only teach a student who is fitting, tzanua, he is modest, v'yari shemayim, he has fear of heaven, v'kosher, and he's kosher. Beis Hillel Aimer, and Beis Hillel says, melamden l'chol adam. Beis Hillel says you should teach everybody. So Beis Shammai said you should only teach a student who has these high levels, high attributes, that he's fear of God, and he's fitting. And Beis Hillel says you should teach everyone. Meya, if you have, according to Beis Hillel, if you have 100 students, Shiatza Asar Tovim, so you'll have 10 good ones. Asara, you have 10. Bishvil Shimatzu Shtaim, you'll have maybe 2 good ones. I mean, it doesn't mean you'll only have that, but you may have 2 good ones in there. Shnayim, if you only have 2 students, you don't know which one's going to come out good, this one or that one. V'im Shnayim Kachas Tovim, or they'll both be good. Gahu Ma'isa Shel Hillel, and there was a certain story that proved the point of Hillel in the Yerushalmi. Shekines l'chol Talmidov. All of Hillel's students came to the class, to the shir. Amar lahem, he said to them, Talmida yeshem kulam, are all my students here? Amar lai, they said, hey, yeah, everybody's here. Amar lo echami Talmidov, one of his students said, Kulam bo chutz mikata shebehem. Everybody came except for the weakest student in the group. So everyone was in class except for the weakest student. Amar lahem, Hillel said to them, Yavo asakatan, bring that weak student. She'asad hador lehisnai gal yadu, because the generation is going to be led by him. Veheviu, who they bring in? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. They brought in Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So for those of you who know, who have learned, we've definitely come across the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the weakest student of Hillel, and he was the one, when you read all the stories about the destruction of the temple, he was the leader of the Jewish people when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. And the Gemara tells us about how he really saved the Jewish people. He was the one when Vespasian asked them to give him 3 things, and he had made sure there was a yeshiva set up in Yavne. It was through his guidance that the Jewish people was saved during the time of the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. So here you have, but when he was in school, when he was in yeshiva, in Hillel's yeshiva, he was considered the weakest student, the weakest one. So Hillel said, I'm not starting until the weakest student comes in, because the generation is going to be led by him. Because you never know, when you have a class, or when you're teaching somebody, you don't have to be a technical, you don't have to be a technical teacher, but when you're dealing with someone, some people have the habit to ignore the weaker students. Oh yeah, he's not going to be anything. We don't have to deal with him. We don't have to give him chizik or whatever. But you really never know. There was a story that the Panovich Rav, went to the Chazon Ish. He wanted to start a kollel, an advanced learning program for geniuses, for Iluyim, only for geniuses. And he wanted to get the advice of the Chazon Ish if it's a good idea. And the Chazon Ish says, no, it's a terrible idea, because what's going to be with people like Rav Yitzchak Elchanan? What did he mean? Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector was the leader of the generation before the Chazon Ish in Europe. He was the Kovner of. He was the Gadol Hador, the biggest Talmudic scholar of the time, the leader of the generation. But when he was younger, he wasn't a genius. He didn't have exceptional mental faculties that were beyond everybody else. But he worked very, very hard. He worked very hard until he became the greatest rabbi of the generation. So the Chazon Ish was telling him, you don't just focus on the geniuses in yeshiva, you focus on everybody. Because to be a big person, to be a Talmid Chacham, you don't have to be a genius. To be successful in Yiddishkeit, you don't have to be a genius. You do have to work hard. That you have to do. So just like Hillel was saying, we're not starting until the weakest student was saying, until the weakest student comes. And so too, the Chazon Ish was saying, you don't want to make a kollel just for geniuses, because what's going to be for people like Rav Yitzchak Elchanan, who weren't natural geniuses, but they worked very hard. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. You have to have a lot of students. Okay, continues Rabeinu Yonah. You don't push away the weak students because of the great students. Kids will become, meaning baby goats will become goats. They'll grow. The weak students now, you don't know what's going to be with them in the future. Rabbi said, in the morning, you should plant, and in the evening, don't stop. What does that mean? If when you're a young teacher, you have many students, make sure you have students in your old age also. You want to have a lot of students. Having a lot of students is a very good thing, and it's a very big merit for a Rav. But I think this, in addition, the Mishnah is talking about a Rebbe and a teacher and the students, but I think it applies in many other situations also. We have a tendency to overlook those that are weaker intellectually, those, for sure, we overlook people that don't have important standing in the community, and that's not the proper perspective. Okay, so now let's continue. The Mishnah continues. It says, "V'asu siag l'Torah," should make a fence for the Torah. What does this mean? Shenemar, as it says, "Ushmartem es mishmarti." You should make a guard for my guarding. Asu mishmaris l'mishmartu. Make a guard for my guarding. That's a commandment in the Torah. The Gemara learns out from that verse. It's a commandment on the rabbis to make laws to protect the Torah. We have Torah laws and we have rabbinic laws. The goal of rabbinic laws is to protect the Torah. Even those rabbinic laws which don't directly address a certain mitzvah of the Torah, but they seem like new commandments, let's say maybe like Megillah, maybe Hanukkah. The Rambam writes that the idea behind all rabbinic laws is lechazek hadas uletakena olam, is to strengthen the religion and to fix the world. But for sure, we have many rabbinic commandments that are fences around the Torah, so that we don't come to violate the mitzvahs of the Torah. V'siyagu davar gadol meshubach. We're going to see how important those fences are. People have the tendency to say, oh, that's a rabbinic law, it's not so important, I don't have to take it so seriously. But we're going to see how important the rabbinic laws are. And in a way, they're more important than Torah laws. We'll see. A fence is a very important thing. Lasos gadol mitzvahs, to make a guardrail around the commandments. So that someone who fears Hashem won't violate what the Torah says. For instance, the Torah says you can't cook and eat meat and milk together. So we say, okay, even 6 hours apart, you have to be careful not to do that. The Torah says not to work on Shabbos, so we take 18 minutes before to light the candles. 18 minutes before Shabbos starts, to make sure that we don't even come close to violating Shabbos. Therefore, someone who fulfills the words of the sages, that are fences around the mitzvahs of the Torah, Hashem loves him more than someone who actually fulfills the mitzvah. Someone who keeps the fences of the Torah has proven that he has more fear of Hashem than someone who just fulfills the mitzvah. Why? If you fulfill the mitzvah, you don't prove that you have fear of Hashem. But if you fulfill the fences around the mitzvahs, you prove that you have fear of Hashem because you don't want to even come close to violating the mitzvah. He's so careful that he doesn't even want to get close to doing something wrong. But let's say somebody who does the mitzvahs, but he doesn't keep the rabbinic restrictions, the rabbinic fences around the mitzvahs. Marlano, it appears, yeah, he'll do mitzvahs if it's easy for him, but he's not so concerned if it's not convenient for him about not doing the mitzvah. Well, if it's parrots, lochash, he's not worried about breaking the fence. Parrots get nachash, and someone who breaks the boundary will be bitten by a snake. The words of our sages, the words of the sages are fundamental, and the trunks, trees, he says, trunks to come to fear of heaven. Shehu ikar ha'olam, which is the main point of the world, v'yesod ha'mayla, and the foundation of high levels. V'chol ha'mitzvahs kulan properos eleha, and the mitzvahs are appetizers for it. So he's saying that what's the whole point? Such an important view, a thing that we're supposed to attain in our lives is yiras Hashem, fear of God. Right? All the mitzvahs, it's the root of all of the negative mitzvahs at least, but it's such an important concept that we make part of ourselves the fear of Hashem. So a person acquires that fear of Hashem by keeping the siyagim, by keeping the fences around the Torah, but not necessarily by keeping the mitzvahs themselves. So we see that keeping the fence around the Torah actually leads, in a certain respect, to a greater accomplishment of what we are here for. We are here to gain yiras shamayim, a real understanding of Hashem, and a real fear of Hashem. And that comes about through keeping the fences, that the rabbinic fence is made around the Torah. And he says not only that, he says that the mitzvahs themselves are only appetizers to the fences around the Torah, meaning the main thing, in a certain sense, the main thing are the rabbinic fences that are put around the Torah, because that leads to yiras shamayim, fear of God, and fear of God is really what we're here for. This is what the sages say: your breasts are better than wine. That Hashem loves the words of the sages more than the wine of Torah. So in this sense, right, this is definitely not the right attitude to just poo-poo, oh, it's only rabbinic, it's something that the rabbis instituted years later, we don't have to keep it, or I don't have to take it so seriously. No, when someone keeps the rabbinic commandments, it shows that he has yiras Hashem, fear of God, and that's the main reason we're here in this world, is to develop a real yiras shamayim, and that's an aspect that one doesn't get to the same extent by just keeping the Torah mitzvahs. Besides the fact that it's really a Torah law to listen to the rabbis anyway, because there's a mitzvah in the Torah to listen to the rabbis, but we see how important it is to listen to the rabbinic commandments, which are fences around the Torah. And before that, we learned the importance of having many students, and that even through the weaker students, the weaker Jews, we don't know what's going to happen with them in the future. We see with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was the weakest student in Hillel's class, and he became the leader of the generation that saved the Jewish people during the destruction. And with that, we finish the first Mishnah. Next time, we'll start leaning into the second Mishnah. Have a wonderful day.